Welcome and good evening tonight. You and I will step quietly into a realm few ever think to explore. A place not marked on any modern map and not recorded in the annals of our known history. We are going far back beyond the rise of our cities, beyond the first written word, beyond even the first humans to walk upon the earth. We are journeying into a time so distant that the familiar threads of our story dissolve into the mists of deep time. And what remains is only mystery. You might close your eyes and picture it. The world turning slowly beneath a sun that was younger then, its light softer, tinged with the faintest golden haze. Oceans stretched farther than the eye could imagine, restless and dark, whispering against the contours of continents that no longer exist in their present form. The air was not the same as the air you breathe. Now it carried scents of untamed earth, sharp minerals, and the salt of ancient seas. It is here, in this vast and unrecorded past, that we ask a question that has the power to unsettle and enchant. In equal measure, what if we are not the first civilization on Earth? What if, long before our history began, another great culture had risen and vanished? Our own story, the one we tell ourselves in school books and museums, begins with small bands of hunter-gatherers slowly learning to farm, then to build, then to forge tools and shape empires. It is a proud, linear story, a march from primitive to advanced. But Earth is not a linear place. It is a place of cycles, of rising and falling, of building up and breaking down. Civilizations, even ours, are small flickers against the backdrop of billions of years. And in all that time, is it truly impossible to imagine that others might have come before us? The rocks beneath your feet are a library. They hold records older than any parchment, older than any memory. But unlike human libraries, these records are difficult to read. They are incomplete, damaged by the slow, patient hand of erosion. Mountains rise and crumble, seas advance and retreat. The crust of the earth itself shifts and folds, swallowing whole landscapes into its molten heart. If a civilization had lived here millions of years before us, much of what they left might have been erased not in some sudden catastrophe, but in the quiet, unhurried work of time. Imagine walking along a lonely stretch of desert. The sand is warm under your feet, the wind dry and persistent. You notice patterns in the stone lines and curves that seem almost deliberate. Are they the marks of ancient hands, or the playful geometry of nature? Without context, you cannot say, and perhaps the past is full of such moments, traces that could be coincidence, or could be the last whispers of something long gone. Science tells us that modern humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years. The Earth, in contrast, has been here for over 4.5 billion. Between those two numbers lies a gulf so vast that our entire recorded history, from the first clay tablets to the glow of our modern cities, is but the last page in a colossal book. What might fill the earlier chapters? Perhaps you picture them. Now those hypothetical predecessors, were they like us? Did they walk upright under the same skies, breathe the same air, feel the same pull of curiosity? Or were they utterly different, creatures of forms and minds we can scarcely imagine? Maybe they thrived in ways that left little trace, not bound by stone buildings or metal machines, but by materials that vanished when their time ended. There is a humility in considering this possibility. We often think of ourselves as the inevitable crown of creation, the natural outcome of evolution's winding path. But what if we are only one version of what Earth can create? One of many experiments life has conducted on this patient stage. The oceans, deep and secretive, might hold answers. Beneath layers of sediment, beneath the shifting sand and coral, there may lie shapes that do not belong entirely to nature. Patterns of symmetry, the ghost outlines of structures, tools, fossilized, not in metal, but in some forgotten substance. But the seas are also Earth's greatest archivist and its greatest eraser. In their darkness, stories are preserved and dissolved in equal measure. And then there is the unsettling thought that perhaps they were here and they knew of us. Not us, exactly, but the future we would become. They may have seen in the stars the possibility of time repeating itself, of civilizations rising from the dust as theirs had. Perhaps they even left something for us to find, a message hidden in a place we have not yet thought to look. You might wonder if such a civilization had existed. Surely we would have found undeniable proof by now. But the Earth does not keep its surface unchanged for millions of years. Rain falls, rivers carve their patient paths, glaciers grind mountains into dust. Even our tallest buildings, left untended, would crumble into nothing within the span of tens of thousands of years. 1,000,000 years would leave scarcely a trace. And if that civilization had ended tens of millions of years ago, the landscape would be utterly transformed. And yet, here and there, we find anomalies, ancient artifacts whose origins are debated, geological oddities that resemble human work but are dismissed as natural formations. These may be nothing more than curiosities, coincidences in the vast lottery of time, or they may be the faintest fingerprints of an ancient intelligence, brushed almost entirely away by the hands of the ages. The question is not only whether they existed, but what their existence would mean for us. Would we see ourselves as part of a larger cycle, humbled by the knowledge that we are not the first to rise? Would we learn from their fate, whatever it was, and change our path? Or would we, like them, find ourselves one day reduced to whispers in the stone, waiting for another to imagine us back into being? As you drift deeper into thought, the boundaries between what is known and what is possible begin to blur. You may picture Earth as a great theater, its scenery shifting with each age. In one era, ice rules the stage. In another, forests and rivers dominate. And in perhaps more than one, intelligent beings walk under the stars, thinking themselves eternal. But eternity is not granted here. Only the stage remains, and the actors change. The night grows quieter now. You can hear, in your mind, the slow breathing of the planet, the sigh of wind across empty plains, the pulse of tides against lonely shores. All of this has happened before. Perhaps all of this will happen again. And in this moment, you stand between what was and what will be, gazing into a past we can only imagine, and yet, somehow, can almost remember. It is strange to think of silence as a presence. We often picture it as an absent something left behind when the noise stops, a void where sound once lived. But in the great spans of Earth's history, silence is not empty at all. It is thick, textured, and alive in its own way. It is the sound of continents drifting in slow procession across the globe. It is the whisper of mountains eroding grain by grain. It is the murmur of forests growing and fading, and the eternal sigh of waves folding into one another upon unbroken shores, long before you and Ib, for the hum of our cities. Before the voices of our kind there was such a silence, not the sterile hush of nothingness, but a world breathing in its own rhythm, without the urgency of our presence. This was the long silence before us, an age when the earth moved at a pace entirely its own, unbothered by the concerns of creatures who had not yet arrived. If you could step into that time, you might first notice the air. It would carry a different temperature, Heavier, perhaps, the perfume of untouched wilderness. The horizon would be unbroken by towers or power lines, only the slow rise and fall of hills, the jagged silhouettes of mountains, the gentle sway of endless trees. Rivers would flow wherever gravity called them, unconstrained by dams or bridges, and the sky, vast and ancient, would be as it always was, its blues unscarred by the pale trails of passing aircraft. In this silence, there was still life and abundance of it, but life that moved without roads, spoke without language, and lived without the record-keeping of history. Forests rustled with unseen creatures, oceans teemed with fish that would never be named. The wind combed through grasses that would never be harvested. For millions of years, this was the planet's rhythm: growth, change, renewal, decay. Ice ages would come and go like the slow breaths of a sleeping giant. Glaciers would advance, grinding valleys into stone, and retreat again, leaving behind lakes and fertile plains. Volcanoes would erupt, draping the land in molten rock, which in time would cool, crumble, and nourish new life. The continents themselves would wander the globe, their slow migrations shaping coastlines that would appear utterly unfamiliar to us if there had been another civilization before ours. It is here in this long, patient silence that their traces would fade. First, the obvious structures would fall, roofs collapsing under the weight of centuries, walls leaning, then tumbling into heaps of stone, roads cracking, roots prying their way through the fractures, rivers shifting course, drowning or erasing. Entire settlements dot in a few thousand years. Nature would reclaim almost everything. In a few million, even the outlines might be gone. A city might become a faint discoloration in the soil, visible only from far above, only to those who knew exactly where to look. And given enough time, even those clues could vanish, hidden beneath new layers of sediment and stone. But perhaps not entirely gone. The silence might still carry faint echoes, a shaped fragment of stone buried deep beneath the forest floor, a scatter of unusual minerals in a place where no natural process could have formed them, a chemical fingerprint embedded in the ice, whispering of a past no one remembers. The long silence before us is like a canvas, repainted over and over across the ages. Each new scene is laid over the old, bright and vivid at first, then fading, until another layer comes to cover it. If you could peel those layers back, you might find entire forgotten worlds beneath each one, with its own colors, its own shapes, its own stories. This silence was not barren. It was alive with the slow work of the earth. The planet was not waiting for us. It was never waiting. Its mountains, rivers, and seas had their own purposes. If we had never appeared, the silence would have continued unbroken, and the forests and oceans would still have been full of voices, just not ours. Imagine walking through such a world. You are standing on a vast, grassy plain. The wind moves like water through the tall stalks, and the sound is soft, almost like breathing. In the far distance, a herd of great animals grazes, creatures long gone in our time, their shapes strange to your eyes. There are no roads leading here, no markers to tell you where you are. If you walked for days, you might never see another of your kind. Perhaps the silence feels unsettling at first, the way an empty room feels before you turn on a light. But then, as your mind adjusts, you begin to hear it differently, not as an absence, but as a fullness, the chorus of insects, the whisper of leaves, the faint rumble of a waterfall far away. This silence is not stillness. It is the gentle pulse of a living world. Civilizations, if they rise at all, are brief against this backdrop. Measured in the lifespan of a planet, our presence is a blink, a bright spark in the darkness. Even the greatest empires, ours included, exist for only a moment before time brushes them away. If there was another before us, their silence would have been far longer than their noise. Their memory would rest not in stories, but in the subtle hints left behind in stone and soil. And perhaps, if they ever looked forward, they would have known something we forget, that no species owns the earth forever. The stage belongs to the planet, and we are only temporary actors upon it. You might picture the long silence as a vast ocean, its surface smooth and unbroken. Civilizations are like stones cast into it, brief ripples that fade until the water is calm again. Whether those stones are cast by us or by another, the silence always returns. Now, imagine the future. Picture the same plain, thousands of years from now. The grass sways as it always has. The rivers flow as they always will. The animals here are not the ones you knew. Perhaps they are strangers entirely, or perhaps they are distant cousins of today's survivors. There is no trace of the city you once called home. The silence has closed over it, as if it had never been. One day, perhaps another being will stand in this place, looking at the horizon, wondering if they are the first. They will search for signs in the rocks, in the soil, in the shifting patterns of the stars. And they will find only fragments, enigmatic, incomplete, the kind that invite more questions than answers. The long silence before us is not only a memory, is also a prophecy. It tells us that the earth does not cling to any one story for long. It will keep turning, keep breathing, keep remaking itself, long after we are gone. And so, as you listen, you might find yourself letting go of the idea that silence is something to be feared. In this long view, silence is simply the planet's heartbeat, steady and enduring. It is the great continuity beneath all the fleeting noise. When you close your eyes, you can almost feel it, the wind through untouched forests, the waves against empty shores, the quiet watch of the stars over a sleeping world. The silence was here before us. It will be here after us, and it is here even now, waiting patiently in the spaces between our words. If the long silence before us was a deep breath taken by the earth, then the geological record is the memory of that breath, written not in ink, but in layers of stone, sediment, and ice. It is a slow, patient archive, one that keeps its secrets for millions of years, and reveals them only to those who know how to listen. When you imagine the history of the planet, you might picture it as a scroll, unrolling from the deep past to the present. But the truth is more like a library, in which most of the shelves are hidden, and many of the books have been erased, rewritten, or lost entirely. Only fragments remain, scattered among the surviving volumes, waiting for someone to read them. These fragments are the shadows in the geological record, faint impressions of things that once were, but are no longer. They are the fingerprints of vanished landscapes, the echoes of climates that no longer exist, the outlines of life forms that have slipped away into extinction. If another civilization walked this earth before ours, their presence might still be here, hidden among these shadows. Not as whole cities or towering monuments, those are far too fragile for time, but as changes in the very fabric of the earth itself. Consider this: human beings have altered the planet in ways that will outlast our species by millions of years. We have reshaped coastlines, diverted rivers, and cut vast wounds into the crust in search of minerals and fuel. We have spread elements into the soil and atmosphere in concentrations that nature would never have produced on its own. Traces of plastic polymers, industrial metals, and radioactive isotopes. These are signals that will remain long after our buildings have crumbled. If another civilization once stood here, they too may have left such traces. But where would we find them? You might picture the Earth as a great time machine, its layers stacked one upon another, like the pages of a book. The youngest layers are near the surface, our own chapter, still unwritten in full, while the oldest are buried deep, pressed into stone by the weight of ages. Each layer holds a story, the spread of a forest, the retreat of an ocean, the impact of a meteor. Some layers tell of catastrophes and mass extinctions, volcanic winters, the shock of ice ages. Others whisper of slow, quiet changes, the kind that shape worlds over eons, and yet these records are incomplete. Whole epochs have been worn away by wind and water, their pages torn from the book of time. What survives is often fragmented, scattered, or distorted. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to read the story clearly. If a civilization rose and fell tens of millions of years ago, the geological record would be our only witness. But those witnesses are often unreliable. Rocks shift, melt, or erode. Ocean floors vanish into the deep trenches of the Earth's crust, recycled back into molten stone. Only in rare, stable places, deep in continental interiors, beneath thick blankets of sediment, do the oldest records survive. Imagine standing on a windswept plain, somewhere in the heart of an ancient continent. Beneath your feet, far below, the soil are rocks that have not seen sunlight in 500 million years. They hold chemical signatures of ancient seas, fossils of creatures that once drifted in waters long vanished, perhaps buried even deeper. There is something stranger, a concentration of metals that should not be there, a pattern of isotopes that nature alone could not produce. To the trained eye, such a discovery would be like finding a faded ink mark in the margin of a page, hinting that someone else once read this story before us. These shadows in the record are often subtle. A sudden spike in certain elements, like iridium, famously marking the asteroid that ended the age of the dinosaurs, can tell of an event far beyond ordinary geology. Unusual deposits of synthetic compounds, if they existed, might speak of industry, of tools and machines. Even the absence of certain isotopes, stripped away by unnatural processes, could hint at technology we cannot yet imagine. But here is the challenge. Nature itself is a master at making patterns. Volcanoes scatter metals. Lightning forges strange compounds. Bacteria create chemical signatures that mimic the work of industry. And so, even if we find something curious in the rocks, we must ask, was this the hand of intelligence, or simply the patient artistry of the earth itself? The search, then, is as much about what is missing as what is present. Gaps in the fossil record, sudden changes in climate without a clear natural cause, layers of sediment that seem to have been disturbed, removed, or replaced in ways that defy ordinary erosion. These are the shadows, the negative spaces in the picture that might point to a story erased. Consider also the deep oceans. The floor of the sea is young, in geological terms, constantly renewed by the slow churning of tectonic plates. Any ancient cities, harbors, or coastal civilizations from millions of years ago would have been swallowed long ago. Their remains, dragged into the dark belly of the earth and melted beyond recognition. But in some places, near the edges of continents, older sediments survive, buried beneath miles of silt. There, perhaps, the whispers of another age still rest, locked away from the eyes of the surface. And what of the ice? In the frozen cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica, we can read the air itself, preserved in tiny bubbles for hundreds of thousands of years. If there had been a sudden, unnatural change in ancient surge of greenhouse gases, or a mysterious cocktail of chemicals, it might be caught there, a frozen breath from a forgotten world. Yet beyond a certain depth, even the oldest ice melts away, erasing whatever record it once held. The geological record, for all its power, is not a perfect diary. It is more like a fading photograph. Edges blurred, colors altered, entire subjects missing. And so we are left with questions. If another civilization walked this earth, did they leave enough behind for us to see? Or have the slow hands of time brushed away their traces entirely? Still, there is a strange comfort in this uncertainty. It means that we, too, will one day become shadows in the record. Our cities will fall. Our monuments will crumble. The chemicals we leave behind will fade, carried away by water, buried beneath new stone. Perhaps a few hints will remain, for a curious mind far in the future to find and to wonder about us, as we wonder about them. The stones are patient. They have seen continents break apart and drift together again. They have watched mountains rise and be worn to dust. They have carried the bones of creatures older than imagination, and they will carry ours as well. In time, we will be a layer thin perhaps, but present pressed between the deep silence before us and the deeper silence that will follow. When you look at a cliff face, with its stripes of red and gold and gray, you are looking at a library of time. Each band is a chapter written in sand and clay, in volcanic ash and ancient coral. And somewhere, perhaps, among those chapters, there is a page from a story we do not remember, faint, smudged, almost lost, a shadow in the record. If you close your eyes, you can picture it, a river cutting through stone, revealing layer after layer, like the slow turning of pages. The sun warms the rock, a bird circles above, calling once before drifting away. The air smells faintly of rain, though the sky is clear. Beneath your hand, the stone is warm and solid, but somewhere deep inside it, a secret rests, waiting for the right eyes to see. These shadows are not answers, they are invitations. Each one asks us to look closer, to listen more carefully, to remember that our own story is still being written, and that one day it too will fade into the long, patient silence of stone. Beneath the surface of the oceans lies a world that is at once hidden and eternal. It is a world without wind, without the changing light of the seasons, without the sound of rain. Down there, in the quiet dark, time moves differently, and in that slow, patient space, the memories of Earth sometimes linger far longer than they do upon the land. If we wish to search for the traces of a civilization long vanished, one that may have lived and died millions of years before ours, the oceans are both our greatest ally and our most formidable barrier. They are a vault that holds the sediments of ages, and they are a veil that hides them from us. You might imagine the ocean floor as a vast, unbroken plain of sand, but it is not. It is a living, shifting landscape, mountains rising in darkness, canyons deeper than any on land, rivers of cold water winding through the black. It is here, on the seabed, that layer upon layer of silt has drifted down through time. In that silt are tiny records, microscopic shells, grains of volcanic ash, traces of chemicals and minerals that speak of worlds long gone. For millions of years, these sediments have been settling one upon another, creating a record far more continuous than what we find on land. The continents are restless, they fold, crack, and erode, but in the deep ocean basins, change comes slowly. Here, ancient layers are not swept away by storms or ground down by glaciers. They remain, buried in the dark, year after year, age after age. And yet, even the ocean keeps its secrets imperfectly. The surface of the seabed, what we might see if we could simply walk across it, is young, far younger than the continents. This is because the ocean floor is part of the Earth's restless skin. New crust emerges at the mid-ocean ridges, where molten rock seeps up from the mantle, pushing the old crust aside. Over millions of years, that crust is carried toward the deep trenches, where it is swallowed back into the Earth's interior. The seabed is a slow-moving conveyor belt, renewing itself over tens of millions of years. This means that if an ancient civilization once built its cities by the coast, or if it sailed the seas in ages long before our own, much of the ground it walked upon is gone, drawn down into the deep and melted beyond recognition. But not all. Along the edges of continents, there are shelves and slopes where sediments have piled up for hundreds of millions of years. In these quieter corners of the seafloor, far from the chaos of tectonic ridges and trenches, the record is deeper, older, and sometimes astonishingly intact. Imagine sinking slowly through the blue, past the flickering sunlight, past the dim twilight zone, into the deep black. You land upon a plain of soft mud, disturbed only by the slow drift of snow-like particles falling from above. This marine snow is made of tiny fragments, dust, plankton, the remains of life, and, over time, it becomes the pages of an ancient book. Each layer that settles here captures a moment in Earth's history, locking it away where sunlight and storms can never reach. If we could read those pages, what might we find? Perhaps a thin line of ash, marking a volcanic eruption so vast it darkened the skies for years. Perhaps a sudden change in the chemistry of the sediment, telling of an ancient climate shift toward the byproducts of industry, if industry there once was. Perhaps, far deeper down, a layer unlike anything we know. A deposit of metals shaped into grains and compounds that could only be the work of a mind. The thought is tantalizing, but to know for sure, we would have to go there, to drill down into the layers, to bring the deep time of the oceans up into the light. And that is no simple task. The oceans are vast, their depths crushing, their distances enormous. Even today, we have mapped only a fraction of the seabed in detail, but there are places where the clues are closer. The continental shelves, the gentle slopes that extend from the land into the sea are often drowned coastlines, once dry during the great ice ages. If an ancient civilization lived during a colder time, when sea levels were far lower, its ports, villages, and fields might now be hidden beneath these shallow seas. Archaeologists have already found hints of human prehistory here: stone tools. On the submerged plains of Doggerland in the North Sea, traces of ancient settlements off the coasts of India and Japan. These are the remains of our own kind from just thousands of years ago. But go back further, tens of millions of years further, and the water becomes a darker curtain, behind which we can only guess. Still, the ocean floor leaves fingerprints. Even if structures are gone, their presence may be written into the sediments. A sudden influx of certain metals, layers of disturbed silt, suggesting massive dredging or construction. Chemical residues that could have come only from advanced processes. Such signs, if they exist, would not prove a civilization beyond doubt, but they would whisper the possibility. And then there is the matter of the strange. From time to time, deep sea cores reveal anomalies, odd layers, unusual mineral deposits, traces of processes we do not fully understand. Often, these turn out to have natural explanations: a meteorite impact, an unusual bloom of life, a rare volcanic event. But every so often, one resists easy classification. Scientists, cautious and careful, do not rush to call these the work of intelligence. Yet, for the curious mind, the question remains open. It is worth remembering that the ocean is not only a place of burial, is a place of preservation. In the absence of light and oxygen, certain materials last far longer than they do on land. Wooden ships, metal tools, even delicate fabrics can survive for centuries in the deep. Given millions of years, most would still decay. But traces, the faintest of outlines, might endure in ways we cannot yet detect. If you close your eyes now, you might picture it, a ridge on the seafloor, covered in coral and sponge, silent except for the soft clicks of distant creatures. Beneath the living crust lies something older a shape, too regular to be chance. Not a city, perhaps, but something that once had purpose. A fragment of a structure, a pattern in the stone. The currents pass over it, and silt drifts down, as it has for millions of years, until it is as much a part of the seafloor as the rock beneath. It is a humbling thought that whole histories may lie just beyond our reach, hidden beneath waters we have barely touched, that the oceans, in their calm and in their storms, are both the erasers and the keepers of time. One day, perhaps, we will read more of their story. Our ships will go farther, our robots will dive deeper, our drills will reach layers that no human eye has seen. And there, in the cold and the dark, we may find the faint, enduring traces of those who came before. Until then, the oceans keep their counsel. They roll against the shore as they have for ages, their waves breaking into foam, their tides breathing in and out with the pull of the moon. Beneath them, the slow rain of the marine snow continues to fall, building the pages of a book that no one has yet finished reading. And somewhere in that book, perhaps, is a chapter about a civilization we have never known. A chapter we may one day find, or one that may remain forever closed, its story held safe in the deep, blue quiet. The land has always been the canvas of our ambitions. Here, under the open sky, we shape stone into walls, carve mountains into temples, lay out roads that stretch to the horizon. Every civilization leaves its mark upon the land, but time is patient, and time has hands of its own. The ruins we know today are the lucky survivors' fragments, spared from the full force of wind, water, and shifting earth. Many others, perhaps greater and more wondrous, have been unmade completely, leaving nothing but the faintest of shadows. Imagine a great city, its towers shining under a sun from another age. People walk its streets, markets hum with voices, bridges span broad rivers. And now, imagine the slow turn of the clock, seasons passing into centuries, the wind rising, carrying grains of sand against every surface, rainwater seeping into every crack, freezing and thawing, prying stone apart. 1,000 years pass, roofs collapse, timber rots away, roots push up through floors, walls tumble into heaps. Another 1,000 years, and the heaps are worn down to mounds. The mounds are softened into hills. Hills are covered in grass, then forest. Eventually, even the forest moves on, leaving only earth that looks as if it has always been there. If we were to walk here now, we might never suspect that a city had once stood beneath our feet. This is the work of time and of nature's endless cycle of growth and decay. In humid lands, the jungle claims stone with astonishing speed. In deserts, the sand shifts and swallows what lies in its path. In colder regions, ice grinds everything down, as glaciers scrape the land bare. We know this because even within our own recorded history, we have seen ruins vanish. Angkor, once a thriving metropolis in the Cambodian jungle, was almost swallowed entirely by the forest until rediscovered by explorers. The Mayan cities of Central America slept under thick canopies for centuries before the first stone was seen again by human eyes, and these are ruins only 1,000 years old, moments, compared to the deep time of Earth's history. Now imagine ruins, not thousands, but millions of years old. What would remain? Even the hardest stone wears away, grain by grain. Metals corrode, wood crumbles, glass turns to powder. Given enough time, mountains themselves wear down to plains. What chance, then, does a building have? This is why, if another civilization did walk this earth before us, we cannot expect to find whole cities waiting quietly under the soil. The forces that shaped the land would have erased them almost completely, and yet, time is not perfect in its erasing. It leaves behind traces small, stubborn, and subtle. Sometimes they appear as strange geometric shapes in the landscape, visible only from the air. A circle of stones, half buried in the grass. A ridge too straight to be natural. A pattern of depressions that could be the ghost of an ancient foundation. Archaeologists have found such things across the world, the remnants of our own past cultures. But could there be older patterns still? Patterns whose makers we do not know. Other times, the trace is in the soil itself. Layers of earth that bear signs of fire where no natural wildfire could have burned. Deposits of certain minerals, melted and fused in ways that require heat far beyond what lightning or volcanoes can produce. It is here, in these anomalies, that the mind begins to wander. Could these be the fingerprints of an older hand? But to read such fingerprints is difficult. Nature, too, is a master of making the extraordinary from ordinary forces. A hill shaped like a pyramid may be only the work of wind and rain. A layer of fused rock may be the result of an asteroid impact. The world is full of natural processes that mimic the works of intelligence, and so the search for ruins time has tried to erase becomes a kind of quiet detective work. Each clue must be tested, examined, and compared to the great library of Earth's natural history. Most are ruled out, some remain unexplained, and a very few whisper just enough to stir the imagination. Even in the ruins we can see, there is mystery. Take Göbekli Tepe, in modern-day Turkey, a complex of carved stone circles, older than any known city. For thousands of years it lay buried, not by accident, but perhaps by the hands of the people who built it. Why, we do not know. And this is a site only 12,000 years old. How many more lie hidden, buried far deeper, from far older times? Sometimes, the earth itself offers a glimpse when erosion cuts into a hillside or a river shifts its course. In those rare moments, layers long buried are revealed like pages in an open book. We have found fossils this way, traces of ancient forests, and yes, ruins too. But those ruins are always young by geological standards. The truly ancient remains, if they exist, may lie too deep for chance to uncover. There is also the possibility of ruins far from where we expect. If a civilization arose in a time when the continents were arranged differently, its cities might now lie in places unrecognizable to us. Mountains may have risen where plains once stretched. Oceans may have flooded what was once dry. In such cases, even knowing where to look becomes an impossible puzzle. And yet, when we look at the strange monuments of our own age, skyscrapers, dams, great statues, we can't help but wonder what traces of them would survive in 10 million years. Perhaps only the stone elements, weathered into rough shapes, perhaps only a few fragments of metal, buried deep, and perhaps in some fortunate place where erosion is slow and conditions are kind. Something mar a wall still standing, a chamber still sealed. Picture it, far in the future. Long after our own civilization has vanished, the earth shifts and a hillside crumbles. From within the earth, light falls upon a space untouched for countless ages. Inside, carved into the walls, are symbols no one alive can read. A fragment of a statue stands in one corner, its face worn but still human, or perhaps not. The air is still. Dust hangs like a thin veil. Outside, the forest grows on, unaware. The thought is haunting, but also comforting. It tells us that nothing is truly lost. It is only waiting, somewhere, for its time to return. The ruins time has tried to erase are not just the remnants of stone and metal. They are also the faint imprints upon the imagination possibilities that draw our minds across vast distances. Of time, we may never find them all. But perhaps it is enough to know they might be there, sleeping under soil and sand, under forest and glacier, waiting in the quiet darkness as the wind moves across the land, as rivers carve their way through stone, as the seasons turn endlessly. These ruins, real or imagined, remind us of our small place in the great story. And in that story, every trace matters. Somewhere beneath your feet, the ground may hold the last whispers of a place that no map remembers. And somewhere else, beyond the reach of our present, time still carries the weight of a history it has almost but not quite forgotten. Long before ink touched parchment, before history etched itself into stone tablets, there were stories, not the sharp, documented accounts that fill our textbooks, but softer ones, woven in campfire smoke, carried in the breath of elders, passed from voice to voice under the patient gaze of the stars. These stories were never meant to be exact. They were meant to be remembered. And so they survive, myths, legends, epics, and sacred tales flowing like rivers through the centuries, changing shape but carrying, perhaps, something older than we realize, if we listen closely and gently. There is a question lingering in them, a suggestion that they may be echoes, however faint, of a world that once was. Imagine yourself on a quiet shoreline thousands of years ago. The air smells of salt, and the sun has just set, leaving the sea a sheet of deep silver. Around a small fire, a storyteller begins. They speak of a great flood that came without warning, swallowing cities, scattering people across strange new lands. You have heard the tale before, but you lean in, because each telling is a little different. In one version, the flood was sent by the gods to cleanse the earth. In another, it came from the breaking of a great barrier in the north. And in yet another, it followed a war between peoples who wielded powers no one today can imagine. Flood myths. They appear almost everywhere, from Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh to the stories of ancient China, from the Lakota people of North America to the Ambori of New Zealand. There is this persistent memory of waters rising, sweeping away the old world. Could they all be imagining the same thing by chance? Or do these whispers point to an event, perhaps several events, so devastating that it carved itself into the shared memory of humanity? And what if, hidden within the allegory, is not only the memory of disaster, but the memory of civilizations before our own? The myths speak of other things, two golden ages, when humans lived longer, knew more, built wonders beyond imagining. The Greek poet Hesiod told of an age when people lived like gods, free from toil, in a world without sickness or sorrow. Hindu texts speak of Ugas, vast cycles of time, in which knowledge and virtue wax and wane, and in the earliest ages, humanity possesses skills an understanding that later ages lose. Even the oldest Egyptian tales hint at rulers who reigned for thousands of years, long before the dynasties we know from history books. Scholars interpret these as symbolic, or as exaggerations born of poetic tradition, and perhaps they are. But what if they are also memories, stretched by the passage of time, of a very real, very distant past? The challenge is that myths do not wear their truths plainly. They speak in symbols. A city of gold might be a literal place, or it might be a way of describing a society rich in knowledge. A war among the gods might recall a conflict between two human cultures, so advanced they seemed godlike to those who came after. If we strip away the divine and the magical, sometimes what remains is surprisingly human. Stories of migration, of discovery, of the loss of knowledge, and of the rise and fall of great powers. Consider the tale of Atlantis, given to us by the Greek philosopher Plato. To most, it is the archetype of a lost civilization, an island nation with great fleets, marvelous engineering, and a fatal pride. Sunk beneath the waves in a single day and night, Plato said he heard it from Solon, who in turn heard it from Egyptian priests, who claimed it happened thousands of years before their time. Is it pure invention, a political allegory, or the distorted memory of something real passed down through millennia? Around the world, there are other Atlantean echoes. Lemuria, in the Indian Ocean, the sunken city of Yonaguni, near Japan, the drowned kingdoms of Cantra, Gweled, in Welsh legend, and Lioness in Cornish lore. Perhaps these are all coincidences of human imagination, our tendency to create before and after stories that explain the ruins we see. Or perhaps they are the scattered shards of one long-forgotten event, remembered in 100 different ways. Myths also speak of beings unlike ourselves, giants, shapeshifters, sky people, serpent kings. In modern eyes, they are fantasy. But could they be memories attempt to describe other kinds of humans, or perhaps other species entirely? Ancient encounters with Neanderthals or Denisovans, retold over generations, might grow into stories of strange, powerful beings from the mountains or the stars. And the stars themselves are a constant presence. In the myths, many cultures tell of ancestors who came from the heavens, taught skills, and then departed. The Dogon people of Mali speak of knowledge given by beings from the star Sirius, including details about its companion Stardust. Modern astronomy only confirmed with telescopes. Is it evidence of ancient contact? Or is it simply the product of brilliant observation and storytelling combined? Both possibilities are remarkable in their own way. When you begin to see myths not as pure fiction, but as memory reshaped by time, you also begin to understand their resilience. They survive where buildings crumble, where writing fades. They travel lightly in the human mind, able to cross oceans and epochs. And if there was a civilization before ours, one erased almost entirely by time, it may be through these whispers that we hear from them most clearly. A story of a mountain that glowed with light might be the memory of a volcano, or the memory of something built. A tale of the gods forging weapons might recall ancient technology, dimly remembered. The truth is buried deep, both in the earth and in the tangled roots of our storytelling. To reach it, we would need to listen not only to what is said, but to what is implied, to the patterns that appear when we compare one culture's myths to another's, and find shared motifs across oceans and continents. Imagine laying them side by side: the flood of Gilgamesh, the deluge of Noah, the drowning of Atlantis, great wave in Polynesian legend. Imagine tracing them back, stripping away the cultural dress until only the bare event remains? Could we reconstruct an outline of history that stretches beyond the limits of archaeology? The mythic age that existed may not have been an age of gods in the literal sense. It may have been an age of people who, compared to those who followed, seemed godlike in their abilities. Their works, now lost, might have inspired the temples, the songs, and the great oral traditions of later ages, and perhaps, even now, we are doing the same. We tell stories of our own time, in books, in films, in the endless hum of the internet. In 1,000 years, perhaps only fragments will remain. In 10,000, perhaps only myths, vague stories of an age when people could speak across the world in an instant, when they rode in great silver birds across the sky, when they reached beyond the earth itself. To those who inherit those myths, they may seem impossible. They may seem like dreams of gods, and so the cycle would continue, each age whispering to the next, the voice growing softer with time. Tonight, as you lie listening, imagine that you are hearing not my voice, but a voice carried across 10,000 years, a voice telling you the faintest trace of something older still. The words may not be perfect, and the details may have changed, but the essence has traveled across oceans of time, surviving everything that would silence it. These are the whispers from the mythic age, and if you let them, they will follow you into dreams. Stone remembers, not in the way you or I remember, with fleeting images, with the scent of rain or the sound of an old song, but in silence, in patience. It holds the memory of mountains rising and crumbling, of seas spilling over valleys, of meteors striking in sudden bursts of fire. And if there was another civilization before us, stone might still carry its faint signature. Imagine walking through a desert where the wind has polished the rock for millions of years. You notice strange cuts, perfectly straight lines, stayed into a cliff face where no human hand has been. In recent history, at first glance, they might be dismissed as natural fractures, but under certain light, they form patterns, angles too precise to be explained by chance. We see this in places like the mysterious megaliths of Baalbek in Lebanon, where stones weighing hundreds of tons seem to have been cut, moved, and set in place with a precision that puzzles even modern engineers. These stones are part of a known historical structure. But what if they themselves are remnants from something older, reused by later builders who no longer remembered their original purpose? This idea is not so unusual in archaeology. Many cultures have repurposed the works of those who came before. But if the true origins of certain structures stretch not hundreds, but tens of thousands of years into the past, then the story changes entirely. Sometimes the signs are more subtle. Microscopic patterns in mineral deposits hint at intense heat applied in ways nature does not produce. Layers of unusual alloys appear in geological strata, mixed with ancient sediments. Small anomalies, scattered and often dismissed, yet each a tiny question. Could these be remnants of an industrial process long forgotten? The earth is not an easy place for delicate evidence to survive. Wind, rain, ice, earthquakes all conspire to erase the traces of time. And yet, there are moments when we stumble upon something so strange that the mind lingers. Consider the so-called London hammer, a hammer-like tool found encased in rock that some believe to be over 100 million years old. Mainstream science debates the dating, suggesting more recent intrusion into ancient rock layers. But the curiosity remains. What is the oldest sign of human or human-like craftsmanship we can truly verify? And then there are the geoglyphs designs, carved into the Earth's surface on a massive scale, like the Nazca lines of Peru. They are visible only from above, as if meant for eyes in the sky. These patterns could have ceremonial or astronomical purposes, or they could be messages left behind, intended for those who would one day return from the ground. You cannot see the shape, but from a height perhaps, from a mountaintop, or the vantage of a bird you begin to understand. And you wonder, were these 4 human eyes, or something else entirely? But the stone is only half the story. The other half is written. In the sky, stardust falls upon Earth every day, tiny grains from comets and asteroids sprinkling across oceans and fields. Within that dust are records of cosmic events, supernova, asteroid impacts, even changes in the sun's behavior. Some researchers have found layers in ancient sediments rich in rare isotopes, formed only in the hearts of exploding stars. One layer, in particular, seems to mark an extraordinary event around 12,800 years ago. An unusual concentration of platinum and microscopic spherules, consistent with a massive cosmic impact. Some believe this event triggered dramatic climate change, floods, and the collapse of early cultures. Others see it as the possible end of an older civilization's golden age. If such a civilization existed, the heavens may have been both its guide and its undoing. Many ancient cultures tracked the stars with astonishing precision. The alignments of the Great Pyramids, the temple complexes of Angkor, Wat, and Stonehenge itself, seem tied not only to the sun and moon, but to specific stars and constellations. These are often interpreted as agricultural calendars or religious markers, but they may also have been records, written not in ink, but in architecture. Imagine a people who understood the slow wobble of Earth's axis, what astronomers call precession, thousands of years before modern science rediscovered it. Imagine them encoding this knowledge into monuments that would outlast even their own memory. And perhaps they did so because they knew the sky was both a map and a warning. A certain star's position might have foretold an approaching danger, a cycle of destruction repeating over eons. In some myths, the heavens are not just home to gods, but to ancestors, those who came before, and perhaps those who will return. The Pleiades, the 7 sisters, appear in stories across the globe, from Aboriginal Australia to the Cherokee of North America. The similarities are striking, as if the same knowledge was carried across oceans of time. Could the stars themselves have been a kind of meeting point, shared reference that any intelligent beings, no matter how far apart, could understand? Signs in stone and signs in stardust share something profound. They require patience to see. A carved megalith might stand for thousands of years, unchanging to the casual eye, yet telling a precise astronomical story when observed carefully. A layer of cosmic debris in the Earth may look like ordinary dust until examined with the right tools. If we are the second civilization on Earth, then these signs may be the quietest messages imaginable. They do not shout, they do not demand belief, they simply wait, hidden in plain sight, for someone with enough curiosity to notice them. And perhaps that is the most haunting thought of all. Maybe such messages are everywhere, scattered like seeds, but our lives are too brief to recognize their full meaning. Consider the carved stones of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey pillars, with intricate reliefs of animals, symbols, and patterns. Mainstream archaeology dates them to about 11,500 years ago, before the invention of the wheel, before the rise of cities. Yet their sophistication suggests not the beginning of civilization, but the continuation of something older. What if the builders were preserving knowledge passed down from survivors of a much earlier world? And what if the site itself was intended as a library in stone, a place where the sky and the earth were mapped together? We find similar echoes in other places. The massive earthworks of the Amazon, only recently revealed by satellite. The ancient stepwells of India, blending engineering with sacred geometry. The strange Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, whose stones fit together so tightly that a knife blade cannot pass between them. Each, in its own way, defies easy explanation, and each invites the same quiet question: did someone before us leave a sign? The problem, of course, is that signs without a key are like books in an unknown language. We can admire them, measure them, even replicate them, but their deeper meaning remains locked. Without knowing the culture, the context, and the worldview of the people who made them, we are left to guess. Still, the guessing matters, because to even ask these questions is to open a window onto a longer, richer view of our planet's story. And maybe, one day, the key will turn. Maybe a fragment of text will be found that matches a carving. Maybe a buried city will emerge perfectly preserved, revealing the link between the stones and the stars. Until then, the signs remain where they have always been, in the patient bones of the earth, and in the endless drift of the night sky. If you close your eyes now, you can almost picture it, a great stone circle under a sky brighter with stars than we ever see today. The air is cold, the wind steady. Figures move slowly among the stones, aligning their instruments, waiting for a particular star to rise over a marked horizon. In that moment, they are not just looking upward, they are speaking to the future. To us, we may never fully hear their words, but we can feel the intent. Like a gentle hand reaching across thousands of years, stone remembers, stardust remembers, and so, perhaps, will we. If another civilization once thrived on this earth, then the question becomes as quiet as it is profound. Where did they go? We look up at the stars and wonder if life exists elsewhere, but perhaps the more haunting mystery is the life that might have existed right here, long before us. Civilizations rise, we know this. They flourish, expand, and eventually they fall. It has happened many times in our recorded history. Empires forgotten, cities swallowed by jungle, cultures erased until only faint echoes remain. But if an older, deeper civilization once existed, its disappearance would have been on a scale we can barely imagine. Imagine an entire global network of people builders, thinkers, dreamers vanishing not over centuries, but over a heartbeat of geological time. One day, they are here. The next, they are memories, fading into the soil, into the sea. How could that happen? Some possibilities are quiet, some are violent, some are slow, creeping changes that take generations to notice. Others arrive in a single instant, rewriting the world. Perhaps the most obvious cause is nature itself. The earth is not a gentle caretaker. It is beautiful, yes, but it is also restless. Volcanoes can bury cities under rivers of ash in minutes, as happened in Pompeii. Earthquakes can shatter whole regions without warning. Floods, droughts, ice ages, these cycles have reshaped the planet many times. If you were to stand at the edge of an ancient shoreline, you might notice something strange. The line where the ocean once reached is far above your head. Water has moved like a living thing across the continents, swallowing land and revealing it again. For an early civilization dependent on fertile coastal plains, a sudden rise in sea levels could erase their cities completely. Some scientists believe that about 12,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended, massive floods swept across the planet, submerging vast areas that had been home to early cultures. In such an event, an entire coastal civilization could vanish beneath the waves. More sudden endings, a meteor strike, like the one that ended the age of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, can change everything in moments. Even a smaller impact could send enough dust and debris into the atmosphere to block sunlight, cool the earth, and collapse global ecosystems. In human memory, we have the story of Tunguska in 1908, a meteor exploding over Siberia, flattening hundreds of square miles of forest. Imagine something far larger striking an ancient city. There would be little left to find. Still, some endings may not have come from the sky or sea. The Maya cities were abandoned, their stone temples left to the jungle. The people did not vanish, but their way of life did. The Easter Island culture fell into decline after overusing its resources. If an ancient, advanced civilization once lived here, perhaps they too reached a tipping point. The balance between their growth and the world that sustained them may have broken. Fields could have turned to dust. Forests could have vanished. Rivers could have dried up. And then there is a possibility more unsettling still. Perhaps they left not in the sense of traveling across continents, but in the sense of leaving the earth entirely. This idea drifts toward the edges of our imagination, but it is not impossible to consider. If a civilization had reached a level of technology similar to, or beyond, our own, they may have developed space travel. If their home was threatened by nature, by war, by cosmic danger, they may have chosen to leave their planet behind. Where would they go? Perhaps to the moon, to Mars, or to another star system entirely. If so, they may still exist somewhere, far away, carrying with them the story of a world they once called home. There are myths, scattered across the earth, of sky people beings, who came from above or returned to the heavens. Most cultures treat these stories as symbolic, spiritual, but what if they are faint cultural memories of a real departure, retold and reshaped over countless generations? Then again, perhaps they did not all leave. What if remnants of that civilization are still here, hidden in plain sight, not in the form of grand cities or advanced machines, but as knowledge carefully concealed, passed down in rituals, stories, and symbols? What if the survivors blended into the human populations that came after, their origins forgotten over time? Imagine a group of survivors living quietly among hunter-gatherers, their advanced tools lost, their numbers too small to rebuild quickly. They teach what they can: agriculture, navigation, astronomy, but without the infrastructure of their old world, the knowledge becomes legend, and legend becomes myth. And perhaps that is why ancient cultures around the world seem to leap forward in technology and organization at unexpected moments. Perhaps these were not sudden inventions, but rediscoveries, gifts from the last keepers of a forgotten age. When we search for them today, we are working against time itself. Organic materials, wood, cloth, leather rot away in decades or centuries. Even metal corrodes, turning to powder. Stone lasts longer, but even stone wears down, breaks, and disappears into the earth. If they truly lived long before us, most physical traces may have been erased. What we find now might be fragments, an unusual artifact, a line of stones pointing to a star, a layer of metal dust in ancient rock. Clues, but not answers. And so the question remains, where did they go? The answer may be that they never fully went anywhere. They are here, in the deep structure of our cultures, in the shapes of our myths, in the ways we measure the year by the turning of the sky. They are here in the instinct to build, to explore, to look upward, or perhaps they are truly gone. Their story ended so completely that only the earth itself remembers. In the end, we are left with possibilities, not conclusions. We stand, as they might have once stood, on the edge of the unknown, aware that civilizations are fragile. It is about us. It is a reminder that we too are not immune to the forces that shape and erase history. One day, far in the future, someone may ask the same question about us. If we live now as the second civilization, we might remember that the first is not here to tell us what went wrong. We will have to discover that ourselves, and hope we make choices that allow us to leave a gentler story behind. Perhaps, in the long arc of time, every civilization leaves in three ways at once. Part of it vanishes entirely. Part of it lingers, transformed into something unrecognizable, and part of it. Some memories do not live in books. They live in rivers, in the smell of rain on dry soil, in the wind that moves across the high grass. If there was another civilization before ours, perhaps their greatest legacy is not something we can hold in our hands, but something we feel without quite knowing why. Earth, in her quiet and patient way, remembers. Imagine the surface of the planet as a slow-moving canvas. Continents drift like brushstrokes, oceans deepen and recede, mountains rise and then crumble. Through it all, traces of past lives settle into her folds. Fossils, sediments, the faint chemical fingerprints of fire and stone. Somewhere within that vast archive might be the whisper of a forgotten people. It could be hidden in the layers beneath our feet, a thin band of unusual minerals in ancient rock, evidence of smelting, perhaps, or the byproduct of a technology long erased, a pattern of isotopes that does not match any known natural process. When scientists drill ice cores from the far poles, they are reading the diary of the planet, page by frozen page. Each layer of snow holds tiny bubbles of air from a year that has passed. Some of those bubbles carry traces of volcanic eruptions, forest fires, and even human industry from centuries ago. If an earlier civilization had burned fuel, shaped metal, or altered the atmosphere in some way, perhaps a faint echo still sleeps in those deep, compressed layers of ice. But Earth's memory is not just chemical. It is also written in stories. Long before paper, before ink, before the steady shapes of alphabets, there were oral traditions, myths, legends, songs. Their words carried carefully across generations, like a flame kept alive in darkness. These stories might seem to drift into the realm of fantasy. Floods that covered the world, beings who came from the stars, golden ages when humans lived in harmony with the cosmos. But sometimes, buried in those tales, there may be a core of truth. Consider the flood myths. Nearly every culture on Earth, from the Sumerians to the Norse, from Pacific Islanders to Native American tribes, tells of a great deluge. The details vary. Some speak of divine punishment, others of cosmic cycles, but the image is the same: a world transformed by water. The survivors few, the past swept away. Could these be fractured memories of a real event, perhaps a global or regional catastrophe that ended an earlier age, passed down in the only way it could survive, through the human voice? And then there are the monuments. Scattered across the earth are structures whose origins are still debated. The pyramids of Egypt, the stone platforms of Nanmadol, the megaliths of Göbekli Tepe, the Moai statues of Easter Island. Each is explained, in part, by the cultures we know. But occasionally, there are details, engineering techniques, alignments with the stars, the sheer size of the stones that seemed to hint at knowledge older than the civilization credited with the work. What if these were not the first creations of their kind, but the last echoes of a much older architectural tradition, the survivors of a vanished civilization, teaching new peoples how to shape stone in ways they themselves had inherited? The Earth's lost children may have left other gifts too, though not always in ways we recognize. Perhaps they passed down agricultural knowledge that allowed humanity to settle and grow. Perhaps they seeded languages with certain words, ideas, or metaphors that persist even now. The memory could even be in usin, our DNA. Modern humans carry genetic traces of other human species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, woven into our cells like faint watermarks on ancient parchment. If there were another branch of humanity that was highly advanced, their genetic imprint might still be here, unrecognized, mixed so thoroughly with our own that we no longer see it as separate. Sometimes the memory is less about facts and more about feelings, a sense of Dacia vu when standing on a windswept cliff, the strange familiarity of a place you have never been, a dream of a city you cannot name, yet you know the shape of its streets. These may be the quietest echoes of all fragments that surface, not in science, but in the private landscapes of the mind. Even the stars may hold a kind of memory. Civilizations that learn to read the heavens often leave records of astronomical events, comets, eclipses, planetary alignments. If an earlier people tracked the sky in detail, their observations might still exist, engraved on stone, mapped into constellations, or embedded in the layout of temples. These cosmic markers outlast many other records, for the stars change slowly, and alignments can remain accurate for thousands of years. But the greatest mystery of Earth's memory is that it is incomplete. It is like finding a book where whole chapters have been torn away, leaving only scattered sentences to guide us. We are left to imagine the missing pages, filling them in with our own interpretations, and perhaps that is how it must be. If the Earth's lost children were meant to vanish entirely, they would have left nothing. The fact that there are fragments, artifacts, enduring myths, strange alignments suggests that some part of them wanted to be remembered. Not fully, perhaps, but enough that someone, someday, might ask the question, who were they? The memory they left is not loud. It does not shout from mountaintops or demand attention. It is subtle, like the faint scent of smoke that tells you a fire once burned here. We in our time are the inheritors of those whispers, and it is up to us to listen. Because memory is not only about the past, it shapes the future. If another civilization once stood where we stand now, then their story might be a mirror for ours, a reminder of what can be lost and of what can endure against the currents of time. The Earth will remember us, too. The question is, in what way? Perhaps that is the final gift of the planet's lost children, not the specific details of who they were, but the awareness that we are not the first, and likely not the last, that we are part of a much longer cycle, one that stretches beyond the fragile boundaries of recorded history. When you look at the ocean, you might imagine that beneath those shifting waves lie the stones of cities older than our dreams. When you walk in the desert, you might feel the ghost of roads worn smooth by feet that no longer walk the earth. Somewhere, the memory waits. And when the wind moves through the trees, or the stars appear in the quiet sky, perhaps you are hearing their voices. We have traveled together through shadows and whispers, through ruins and oceans, through the long silences of deep time. Now, we arrive not at an ending, but at a pause, a place to sit quietly and look back at the road we've taken, the question, we began with what, if we are the second civilization on Earth, is not one that can be answered with a single discovery or a single truth. It is a question that lives in the in-between places, between fact and possibility, between memory and imagination. It asks us to step back from the small frame of our own moment and see ourselves as part of something much larger. When you look at humanity today, our cities glowing at night like constellations, fallen to the ground, it's easy to feel that we are permanent, that we are the center of history. Yet history, as Earth measures it, is vast beyond measure. Civilizations rise and they fall. Landscapes shift. Species vanish. And through it all, the planet turns, patient and unhurried. If we are the second great chapter in Earth's story, then somewhere before us was the first, and perhaps somewhere after us will come the third. That thought can be humbling, but it can also be comforting. Imagine for a moment that there was another people, long ago's, as intelligent, just as curious, just as capable of beauty and invention as we are. They lived, they dreamed, they struggled, they loved, they shaped the world in ways we can only guess. And though they are gone, traces of their existence may still ripple quietly through the fabric of Todeon artifact here, a myth there. A strange alignment of stars over an ancient site. If their story has reached us only in fragments, then ours too will one day be fragments. The monuments we build, the machines we create, the songs we sing, they will not all endure. Some will dissolve into dust, others may survive in forms we cannot predict. One day, a distant people may look at the remains of our time and wonder, who were they? They might walk along the weathered skeletons of our bridges, see the strange shapes of our satellite debris orbiting above, or find patterns in our abandoned streets and farmland. They will have only clues, and from those clues, they will imagine the rest in this way. Civilizations speak to one another across time, not through full sentences, but through half-remembered words. And so, our place in time is not just here. And now, it is also in the memory we will leave behind. To think of ourselves this way changes how we see the present, our actions, our creations, our mistakes. All of these become part of a legacy that will outlast us. If we understand that, perhaps we can choose what kind of story we want the future to tell about us. Will we be remembered as careful stewards of the planet, or as careless consumers of its gifts, as builders of lasting wonders, or as a civilization that burned brightly and briefly before fading away? These questions may seem heavy, but they are also an invitation to see the bigger picture, to live with the awareness that time is both fragile and vast. When you stand at the edge of the ocean, watching the tide move in and out, you are standing in a rhythm that has been unchanged for millions of years. Civilizations have come and gone along those same shores, and the waves have carried away their footprints. But the sea remains. When you gaze at the stars, you are looking into a night sky that the Earth's lost children also knew. They too may have traced patterns in the constellations, told stories about Orion, about the Pleiades, about the path of the moon. Their voices are gone, but the stars are the same. And when you feel the wind on your face, remember, is the same air that has moved through the lungs of every living thing that has ever walked this planet. You are breathing the same breath as the past, the same breath as the future. This perspective does something quiet but profound. It softens the borders between us and them, between our civilization and whatever came before. We are not as separate as we might think. We are part of a continuum, a thread woven through the great tapestry of Earth's history, and perhaps that is the most important reflection of all. We are temporary, yes, but we are also connected deeply, endlessly. Everything that has been, and everything that will be. So, as we close this journey, imagine once more the Earth's lost children. Picture them, not as ghosts or myths, but as people walking under the same sun, feeling the same rain, looking up at the same moon. Perhaps, in their final days, they too wondered if there would be others after them, and perhaps, in a way that defies explanation. They hoped that those future people would remember them, and here we are, we have remembered, in the same way. We might hope that those who come after us, whether in centuries, millennia, or longer, will also pause to remember, not just our achievements, but our humanity. Not just the facts of our existence, but the feelings, the beauty, the stories we leave behind. The Earth holds these reflections gently, like a lake holds the stars, and we, for a brief moment, are part of that reflection. So let the thought settle. In you, like evening light, let it be both humbling and hopeful. Let it remind you that your place in time is not fixed, but part of a flowing river that began long before you and will continue long after. And as you drift now into rest, know that you are part of a story much older than history and far from over. Good night.